Welcome back to another episode of the Corner Blue, everybody. It's time. It's time for another World Cup qualifying campaign, and the Corner Blue is back, and we're gonna sit through this, get through this bumpy ride, this ride that looms ahead of us with you. Thanks for joining us. This is Andres Rico. I'm here with Hugo Alvarado, and I'd say a little tough to describe how I feel heading into this next campaign. Always with that inkling of optimism, but balanced out by this inevitable feeling of anxiety of the worst happening. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow. But in any case, we wanted to do kind of like a preview to the match, if you can call it that. But before we get started, Uo, how are you doing, man?
I'm excited, man. I'm looking forward to it. I feel like the beginning of every qualifier is always like the dream begins type of thing. I know the recent history in our national team makes some people feel like where you have mixed feelings and you're not really sure how to feel about it. But for me, I think it's always I don't want to say like starting from scratch, but
it's like opening day in baseball where everyone is at has the same record, same amount of points. It's starting from scratch.
Right. And I'm always a believer that in soccer, football, things can be flipped very quickly. And I feel that a very good start against Puerto Rico tomorrow can be the beginning of a very good campaign for us that hopefully will end up with us qualifying to the World Cup.
Yes, especially considering the winless streak that's been going on for over a year now. I think there would be no better moment to just get that, sweep it under the rug or let the water pass under the bridge than getting that first dub against Puerto Rico to start off the qualifying campaign. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the squad call up, also a little bit of the head to head with Puerto Rico, how they've been doing as of recent, because on paper, historically, any Salvadoran fan will see, oh, we're playing Puerto Rico. It's a smaller of the Caribbean teams, not that much history in terms of footy. Should be an easy dub on paper, but as we know, we are in CONCACAF, in the modern CONCACAF, where anything can happen. So I think it'd be a little disingenuous to assume that. But Hugo, can you talk to us a little bit about what Puerto Rico's last 5 matches have looked like? How have they fared in the area to get a better scope or idea of what El Salvador is going to have in front of them at El Cusco?
Yeah, I mean, Puerto Rico it's kind of been up and down. I will say if we look at the history starting in 2023, at the most recent history, they had some pretty interesting results at the beginning of 2023 against teams like Curacao, for example. They tied 0-0 on about a year ago against Curacao. They won the series against Suriname, and as we know, Suriname is not. It's one of those Caribbean islands, but one of the strongest when it comes to the lowest ranked Caribbean islands, because I don't want to put it next to Trinidad and Tobago or Jamaica or anything like that. But those results I thought were pretty interesting. Then they lost against Martinique 2-0, destroyed the Bahamas. Same thing with Antigua Barbuda. But if we fast forward to the most recent history, or most recent results this year, they draw in Belize against Belize, and then they lost 3-0 against Belize. So, first of all, I don't think we're in a position of to feel too comfortable with these teams. Anything can happen with the globalized soccer these days. I mean, they have a player from Real Madrid in their squad, and a combination of guys from the USL, different different levels in the USL. They might even have a college player or two there. I think their top scorer plays in their local league, I believe. Either that or in Haiti. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, I think on paper we should win this game, and I feel pretty confident that we have the capacity to have a really good start against them. But in no way am I saying that is going to be a piece of cake. I just don't think. Leaving aside that we're in a winless streak, I kind of put that aside. I try not to focus too much on that. I think there's a lot of emphasis on that, and like I've been hearing comments about um, we're the only ones who can get ourselves out of this situation, and I see it more like what we were saying earlier, that it's a new beginning. So I almost feel like approaching the match with the pressure about us being in a poor situation, it's not really benefiting us in any way, as opposed to, at least from a psychological perspective, to look at it as we're all starting the same 0 points. We're starting from scratch. Who cares about the 2 years that where we haven't won any games? At least that's my opinion. I think that it can create extra unnecessary stress for the players to think about the games, the friendly games that we haven't won, or the games in the previous qualifier or the Gold Cup. I just feel like in this phase, it's kind of pointless in a way, because, like I said, we win tomorrow, which I believe we are, and that could just be the beginning of something completely different than what we have experienced in the last year or so.
Yeah, I mean, we know the context of what's been going on, what has led to, the results, some of the factors, not the actual causes, other than, just poor performances on the pitch. But I think, yes, moving into this new qualifying campaign, I think I'd imagine that the team is more focused on starting on the right foot and this new thing ahead of them rather than thinking back of when they lost to Nicaragua away. Like I think they'll be grounded enough to know what the assignment is ahead of them. And I think it does favor us a lot to be starting and kicking this thing off at El Cusca. It would have been somewhat of a difficulty, or it would have been a setback having to travel to the Caribbean, I feel, to start off something like this. As we know, La Selecta tends to have issues traveling, especially to the Caribbean, and then as well as this concept of not playing down, but adjusting to the level of the opponent, especially when they're away. They're not known to go to the Caribbean and straight up dominate away. That's not something that I've seen as of recent. So I think if anything, being at home, having your crowd with you, being at a Cusca, something that, you know, wasn't there for the past year. We haven't returned to Cusco until this year. I think that'll play definitely in El Salvador's favor. When we look at the head-to-head, I think in official competitions, El Salvador has played Puerto Rico only 3 times with 2 wins and 1 draw. The last time that they played was in 1984, and that was a 3-0 win in qualifiers. And prior to that, they played in July of '84. That was a 5-0 win. And their first matchup ever was in 1966 with a 2-2 draw at the Central American and Caribbean Games. So not too much in terms of the head-to-head, which makes sense because Puerto Rico, is not an independent country. And the Gold Cup hasn't been in place or existed until the last 30 what years. Um, and that's something that they've been able to participate in. But we'll see. I mean, we don't know. We haven't had too much history against them, but I think it's a good parameter, like you mentioned, weighing in how they fared against Suriname, Curacao. But I think the Belize match too, their matchup against Belize kind of gives us an idea of the level of where they're at. Completely ignorant to the squad the lineup, the tactics. I'd be lying to you if I've studied that. Fortunately, I am not the head coach of the men's national team. But Ugo, I was thinking we could go over the call-up list in case you wanted to, and then we can just go over some of the surprises, some opinions. Um, I can read it off for you if you want.
Yeah.
So for goalies, we have Mario Gonzalez, Tomás Romero, and then Kevin Caravantes is coming back as a third string keeper. We have Brian Tamacas, Tereso Benitez, Diego Flores, Nelson Flores, who I think is might be able to make his debut in El Salvador because of his immigration status being resolved. We have the return of Alex Larin, Julio Cibrián, Germán Fuentes, Roberto Domínguez, Jorge Cruz, Melvin Cruz, Rudy Clavel, Adán Clímaco, Cristian Martínez, Narciso Orellana in the mid, Darwin Seren, Amando Moreno, Pablo Puñed, Melvin Cartagena, Kevin Santamaría, Jairo Enriquez, Joaquin Rivas makes his return after a hiatus from the national team. Then up top, the forwards, we have Francis Castillo, Leo Mengíbar, Javier Fermán, Nelson Bonilla, Rafael Tejada, and Brian Healy was called up, but I think his participation is doubtful due to injury. So, Ugo, just based off of this, what are some thoughts and opinions?
For me, the list is it's I feel it's a pretty complete list. I think is what we have. I'm not surprised necessarily. I'm happy to see some faces there like Pablo Puñet back. I think he earned his call from what he did in the previous friendlies. Herman is getting another opportunity. In terms of the local guys, they are the base of what Doniga has been calling up. So recently, we know that he wanted to call Kevin Santamaria for the last friendly games, and for visa due to visa issues, he couldn't make it. So I'm not surprised in that sense. I think the list is what we have. I mean, I think there's always going to be some debatable call-ups depending on who you're talking to. I think it's almost impossible for the coach to please everyone. Um, Probably the most questionable one that I've been hearing from people is the no call-up of Mayer Hill. Um, but then that's a position where we have a lot of players, and if he left Leo out, then we hear about why isn't Leo there. Um, so I feel like there's always going to be some questionable call-ups by some. For me, I find it very difficult to find a player that I would say, oh, this guy should have been called, and he's not there. It's one of those lists where I feel like um, that's those are the best, or at least 95-96% of the best players that we currently have eligible for the national team.
I think what stands out for me about this list is that it makes sense. I would have been very concerned if we'd be at this point starting the new campaign and we had the list back from January, or the list of when we went to Costa Rica, or the De La Barrera call up. I'd be very concerned. But throughout the friendly matches, you've seen some new faces arrive to the national team, some rise to the occasion, some not. And I think Doniga's playing it smart by calling up players like Pablo, players like Larin, seeing where they fit, where their fitness level is, but just kind of anchoring this team in a sense that, I feel like that's been lacking the last couple of years. And I think that anchor is what's going to help steer the ship in the right direction. So, with Mayed, I'm not gonna lie. Obviously nothing personal, but I think, his attitude in the game, I think it was against Martinique, under De La Barrera. It just, to me, it showed, that there was a lot of room for growth, to put it in a nice way, in terms of how he was handling himself on the pitch and interacting with his teammates on the pitch. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about that goes, on in the locker room behind closed doors, but to see on the field, just the clashing with your captain, clashing with teammates, things like that. It I was hoping he'd be able to correct that. Maybe he just needs time to mature, get fitness going in Colombia, and hopefully, down the line he becomes, eligible, not eligible, but, he's part of the pool that can be called up. And I think he still is. Um, but that doesn't surprise me, to be quite honest. I know he has a lot of potential, but if anything, the attack for La Selecta the last year or so has just been very fractured. And the word cohesiveness or cohesion we've been throwing out there a lot. And I think if Leo is able to play off of people, bring in someone like Joaquin, his game is playing off of other people. And we saw that in the first Gold Cup with Hugo Perez. If I feel like if you just populate the mid or the upper third with people that can play off of each other and not just kind of gas themselves out, running to the corner and absorbing, um, the defenders, if we can play more cohesive style, more creative, more uh give and go passes, just we need the ball moving rather than stagnant. I think we're gonna be in good hands. And if anything, this call up shows that I think that's the direction that Doniga wants to head, that you're seeing more players that can play off of each other that just aren't going to absorb the ball. And I'm hoping, players like Heido, if they're in, that they're able to combine more, play off of their teammates more. Because I think that's where our attack's been bogged down, is certain players receive it, they don't make the transition in the correct manner, and then defenders fall on them and we lose possession, or we're not even able to make it to the final third. So if anything, that's what keeps me optimistic about this call up, is seeing, you know, we know Amando plays well off of Joaquin. We know Puned will try to play off of anyone around him. If anything, we saw that the last couple of games that he was called up, that moving into space, creating space, trying to play off his teammates, like with wall passes, give and goes. That's the type of stuff that we need to see, and that's going to help us get to that final third, get that last touch in the box so that we can ultimately score. Because to me, that's what's been lacking. I feel like defensively, we've been pretty decent, the last year. I think it's just been issues of not putting pressure on the other team by scoring and allowing them to just attack us. And then that's where the L's come from.
I'm sure that Mayer is part of the pool,
Yeah,
as
for
well as
sure.
other players, and it's just going to depend on the game and the situation. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we don't know, and sometimes there's different factors that a coach has to take into account to put together a group of 23.
Team
Uh,
chemistry. Like, you can't have a
yeah,
dude throwing a ball at their chest during a free kick. That's not going to create chemistry, you know?
right. It could very well be part of it. There's you want good chemistry in the team, and anyways, but like Donny
Obviously,
said,
we're
let's focus on the
supposing. It's
players who
all
are here.
suppositions. Yes.
And I think Brian and I heard yesterday that I think it's confirmed that he's not coming.
Okay. Makes
Um,
sense. I was surprised that they called him up if he was injured.
yeah, and I think in the number 9 position, I think we're covered with Bonilla. I think Bonilla has done a good job there, really good job. We know that Joaquin can play there as well. Hopefully, Brian recovers and he's available for future games. He's definitely a forward that provides something very, very different than what we have and what we have historically have in our national team. So I hope he recovers. But I think for the upcoming two matches, I think we're covered with Bonilla and um, Joaquin, and hopefully if Steven Vasquez recovers, which I don't know, because if he had dengue, he might be weak, and he
Yeah.
lost, week and a half of training. So we'll see. But I feel pretty confident that tomorrow is going to be a very good beginning for us in this World Cup qualifiers.
Yeah, totally agree. I think we're gonna keep today's episode nice and sweet, ladies and gentlemen. We just wanted to make sure we got together, we reconvened, just to talk about something as important as the next qualifying campaign. I'm pretty sure if we get the dub, we'll be back sooner than later, with another episode to follow up. In the meantime, thank you once again for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, or X as they call it these days, on Instagram. You can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And shout out to all of you that tune in, that haven't given up on us and have actually, reached out to us and mentioned, how you were hoping to hear from us or get an episode going. So we appreciate all of you, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and hopefully it is with a dub, with the streak over, because yes, I'm tired of losing or not winning. All right, we'll catch you guys next time.
3-0.
All right, you called it. All right, have a good one.